so the last time we met, we were looking at the pros and cons to hydropower, and just a quick little review. Remember, with hydropower, you're setting up dams made of concrete, so that's a downside right there with carbon dioxide production just from the making all of it. But when we look at the pro side of hydropower, it is 100% clean once it's built. It's a reliable energy source because all you need is a river system, and that water is pretty much going to be there forever. And it brings tourism to the area and jobs and cheaper electricity. The downsides, you can easily see that you have methane buildup from things breaking down upstream, meaning debris and plant and animal matter. You have flooding upstream, you have less nutrients going downstream, and most importantly, you disrupt a lot of the wildlife that's in that nearby area. But it is widely used, but they are starting to do away with them. So when they become old and they need a lot of maintenance, they are going by the wayside. We're going to start destroying them and opening up those ecosystems again. One of the largest, or the largest, I should say, is the Three Gorges Dam in China. You can see the massive size of that. What I like to point out is this flooding over here. If we look at where it was kind of built. So if you think about it, any wildlife that used to live right in this area was wiped out, forced to move, and you could think of that as a downside as well. We do see some changes in the land down here as well. You get more land rather than water, and that again is disturbing wildlife in that region. This is what I was talking about in class briefly before the break. This is what we call salmon ladder, and since fish usually have to go upstream to spawn, what they do is they have to try to find this little port here, and they make their way upstream, and then they are finally up where they can either release their eggs or fertilize eggs, and then they usually die from there. But at least the next generation starts. They do say that these ladders are not very beneficial. They have only seen less than 5% of fish use them and be able to find them. So our fish population numbers drop due to these very large dams that are in place. So one of our other ways that we can produce energy from water is flowing river systems. You have a turbine underground, or you have these paddles that kind of spin. That then spins a turbine on the shore and a generator, and that will produce your electricity going out. One of the other more clever ones is using tides to spin these generators. So as the tide comes in, it would obviously spin the turbine one way. That would then, here's your turbine, here's your generator producing your electricity. And then as the tide goes back out, it continues to spin that turbine just in the other direction, and that will produce electricity. Here's another form of it that's completely underground, and then you would use a cable, seen right here. That cable would go on shore as well. You have some disturbance of fish species underwater, but data shows that they're not very destructive to the ecosystem, so that might be something that rises in the future. We also have the capturing of wave energy, so we can set this huge wave snake out in the water, and as it kind of undulates with the waves go over the top. That then causes a piston to go up and down, and that up and down motion will be captured, and then you have to have a very large tether to the land, and that will have your electricity current going there to be collected. You can also use waves here. As the waves come in, that produces a pressure of air. That air will then spin your turbine, which then would be connected to a generator, which then would produce some electricity. And they actually have ones where as the wave goes out, it also moves that air. Okay, on to wind power really quickly. One of the main things is that we're looking to move them offshore. If you've been down to Atlantic City, you've probably seen them. And that's because the shoreline does produce, or does have, a very strong wind current just off the shore. Okay, we kind of talked about that when we were looking at the weather and climate chapter, you have land and sea breezes that occur. So you're constantly going to have some type of wind out there, and so you have constant energy being produced. That's one of the cons to wind power, though, is that you need constant wind in order to produce electricity. Some of the other cons that we see with wind power is that people just don't like how they look. They are a little bit noisy. And a lot of people say that they kill massive amount of birds, which they do kill birds, but their numbers are very, very low compared to the amount of birds that die by flying into buildings or being hit by cars or just from being hunted. If we look at the pros to wind power, it's 100% clean. It's rather quick to assemble. It does produce jobs for people, something to always remember. The only pollution that's produced is during building, and our net energy is very, very high for that. One of the other great things about wind power is if you were living in the center of the country, or the middle of the country, I should say, and you had pastures where animals are, you can actually just install wind turbines right there. And what companies will do is they'll give you money for it just by allowing them to install these wind farms on your land. So this would be your wind farm here. Notice the animals can graze right around them. They are not affected by it whatsoever. So it's a way that we can kind of have them spread out across our country to produce electricity. But like I said, some people do not like them just because of the way they look. Okay, lastly, for today you have what's called biomass energy. This is anything that comes from residual waste of trees, crops, human waste, animal waste. Okay, we talked about animals being able to produce huge amounts of methane. Well, when manure starts to break down, it actually produces a combustible gas, so that's what we can use right here. So you'd feed a lot of this stuff into a digester. That would produce a gas. That gas comes out as pretty much natural gas, and we could burn that for heat or electricity, and then we could take care of that sludge, and that sludge will either be buried or treated. And then lastly with this, what we would look at is, say, industrial residue, forest residue, anything along those lines. We could take that and we can directly just burn that to produce heat or electricity. So you could heat it to produce heat directly, or you produce steam, steam spins a turbine, turbine spins a generator, and you get your electricity in that fashion. I hope all this helped, and we will be moving on tomorrow.